Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into today's content, I thought it would be a good idea to maybe reveal a little of the conversations that we're having at CluedIn with our customers and future customers and partners as well. You can probably understand there is one particular question the majority of people are asking, and that is, can I actually use my own data against the kind of modern AI models that are prevalent in the market today? And you can probably understand from an enterprise perspective that for the majority of these companies, the reality for them is no. And it's not necessarily because the models themselves aren't sophisticated enough and intelligent enough. In fact, what we're seeing really is that the models of 2 years ago were already enough to do a lot of what's needed for the tasks to be able to get data ready for AI and data better in a situation for automation or business intelligence. So this has not been the kind of core issue. And actually, there's many elements that need to be put into place in order to make data ready for AI. And data is just actually one of those pieces. And actually, the real question we're asking for most end users of the CluedIn platform is, what would make you trust an answer coming back from AI when it included the use of grounding with your own internal enterprise data? This is something the majority of end users can't answer like this. It requires, a little bit more thought to go back and actually come up with. It's not just about making sure the data comes from the right place or making sure that there's attribution in place or making sure that there's explanation in place. You'll find that actually it's very use case specific for what the answer actually is. So I thought it would be about time to kind of talk you through what we at CluedIn are really seeing as what is the new evolution of MDM and data quality, something that is more scaled and grounded using an agentic workflow, an agentic loop. And I want to talk you through a little bit about the how and the why and the what with CluedIn. So yeah, let's start with that kind of premise that majority of us are all in the same boat. We're really trying to think about how we can unlock the many, many years of data that we've accrued, both structured and unstructured. It lives within our operational systems like our CRM and our ERP, or many of those systems. It lives within our new fabric, our new Databricks, our new cloud data platforms. It lives within SharePoints that have been around for many years, network file shares that have been for around many years. There is signals that really sit within those data sets. How do we actually leverage that with the scale and intelligence of AI? So let's dive in. So let's start with a little bit of an agenda of what I'm going to take you through. I think it's important for us to start with the definitions. So every vendor is going to have their own kind of concept and approach to what agentic means for them. And if you actually look out in the market, there doesn't seem to be any real, synchronization that's happening on these definitions. Each vendor, each analyst, each firm, each lab is all coming up with essentially what they see as agentic nature. So I think this is also something that almost separates each vendor from the pack as well, as what's their interpretation, how they bringing it to market. I'm going to then walk you through how it works from a practical, tangible perspective, and really how this is very different to what you have seen from MDM and data quality vendors in the past. At the end, it's always good to kind of get your hands on things, so I'm going to talk you through how you can get started yourself without really any hurdles. Often, that first small use case, that first small business case is enough to be able to show the value of taking this very different approach, this very agentic approach to typical traditional kind of data management life cycles. So I can think the kind of first thing to highlight is that MDM critical capabilities are still very important. It was always the kind of loop and operating model around it that kind of made it hard, time consuming, maybe in some cases painful to be able to operate. And when you think about what we're doing with MDM and data quality, often it's the case that we are to that point where we can't actually ignore the kind of technical data debt that we've accrued with building a particular solution. A good case is always the data lake or the data warehouse. In a perfect world, we'd be able to link together all of our data sources with beautiful keys and joins, and it all fits together nicely. And this is just not the reality for the majority of companies. Data is nulled. Data doesn't have IDs. We don't have the same IDs across different systems. We have to take more of an exception approach to solving some challenges where some things don't always fit into nice defined global rules to be able to clean, standardize, join, merge, link records together from across different systems. So really, Agentic MDM, Agentic Data Management is not necessarily about new capabilities. It's more about wrapping a different loop and approach, something more scalable and driven initially by AI around the same capabilities that you would expect from any MDM and data quality system. And so with that in mind, core MDM, still very relevant, still matters. It's just the way that we approach this challenge can be done in a more efficient, scaled, and in some cases, just a much more intelligent and streamlined manner. So things like survivorship, golden records, stewardship flows, workflow, process, involving people, responsibility chains, all those things are just still super important. It's just the way that we approach that can be just done in a much more streamlined manner today. Now, of course, all of this is building towards the ability for not only humans to be able to interact with different systems via an AI layer. This is traditionally in two main frameworks today. This is MCP and A2A. Both have their own pros and cons. Both are at their different evolutions of the framework. Some are at higher adoption levels than other. But in general, this is really about, first of all, starting out with that human to AI or human to agentic interaction. But I think really the kind of forward-thinking approach to this is really about how agents are going to start working with other agents. So what we at CluedIn are often talking about is that our MCP layer, or this, whatever we're going to call it, this framework is going to end up on, that really it's about making it so much easier for agents to start working with other agents. And you can imagine that the majority MCP layers are going to be a simple wrapping over a REST API layer. And this is very far from agents being able to work with other agents. A simple example, imagine an agent exposed from the CluedIn environment that says you can search and fetch for golden records. Although useful, what would be much nicer is that if we're interacting with a Fabric MCP or a Databricks MCP or any other types of MCP layers, that we don't actually only want to return the data, we actually want to return an entire set of context and metadata around it that makes that other agent know a little bit more about what they're working with. You can imagine if we can also bring back data quality metrics, if we could also bring back a kind of a history on, how many people have looked at this data, how many times it has been audited, how many times has it been certified, how many rules are behind it, how many people are in the flow, has this gone through any workflow approval? These are all things that help that other agent have more context about working on their side. Simple case, imagine getting a data set back that says, listen, this data set is incomplete. There's no other sources backing up its accuracy. It's not gone through any human approval process. It's not gone through any of our policies. It tells that other engine a little bit about how it should be treating that data. In this case, maybe be a little bit wary about the quality of this data. And then I guess the other piece is that, this has been something that in governance has always been talked about, this kind of very, defensive manner of data governance. One of the things that's very obvious with agentic data management is how this moves to the offense, where we're not expecting our customers to know anything about governance anymore. We don't expect them to know the ISO standards, the RFC standards, the IEEE standards. We don't need them to really know what a good governance model looks like. In fact, that's what the vendor should bring. We've had an immense amount of exposure to what makes good data governance committees, what makes good data governance frameworks, what makes good data governance processes. This is what we're baking in to these agents. And in fact, that's the kind of IP and loop and value the vendors like CluedIn can bring. It can fast forward you to what a successful governance framework and project actually looks like. So from our perspective, let's dive in, excuse me, let's dive in a little bit into what we mean by agentic. At CluedIn, we've seen a lot of platforms on the market interpret agentic different to us. In fact, a lot of players in the MDM and data quality space very much see it as a human says something, agent goes off, does some work, it might talk to other agents to do the work, it comes back, interacts with the human and says, here's my plan, what do you think? And that's typically where the work actually stops. Now, that is a very useful workflow. But for us, we would see that more of a little bit of like a chat experience, more of a, here's a task, go off and do it. And as I said, very, very handy. For us at CluedIn, we treat agentic a little bit differently. We kind of envisage it more like a virtual teammate, in that just like we would bring on a teammate to help us with some tasks, we would hope we would want a teammate that doesn't require us always to say, hey, can you now do this? Can you now do this? In fact, what I would rather do is give a certain level of responsibility and access and control to them with an overarching job, and not have them always come back to me every time that they have essentially free time to do some work. And of course, from an agentic nature, due to the scale, you can imagine how much that would be bombarded back to me as a user to kind of say, okay, well, what do we do next? If it was me, I'd get into this loop where I'd say, okay, well, I might get back to you within a few days. And that's not what we want. For me, that's not the value of agentic. For me, the value of agentic is the proactivity that says, give me a high level task of responsibility, and I'm not going to wait for you to kind of invoke any start of work. So a simple example would be, listen, here is the customer data, the client data. Here is the vendor data, the supplier data. Your job in general is to be able to do everything MDM and data quality was supposed to do against this data. So that is standardization, that's enforcing policies, that cleaning, missing values, enrichment from other sources, maybe validation from official sources like Dun & Bradstreet, Moody's, etc. Your job is to get rid of duplicates. Your job is to standardize the data semantics. Your job is to make the data more flexible, to essentially make it more ready for insight out the other end, because generically speaking, I can just do a lot more with that data without having the hurdles of, I don't really trust this data at all. That's one of the good pieces, I guess, around data quality and MDM, is that it's the tasks you want those systems to do is finite. You know exactly why you want an MDM system or a data quality system, which also means these agents can be finite in the tasks that you can give them. In another way, don't wait for me to tell you if you find a customer or client record issue. You're supposed to fix that. Now, in that, it needs good guardrails. There needs to be processes that are built around it that make sure that I can always be in the loop about what it's doing. I can always control that final step of, that looks great, please go ahead and do that in a very deterministic manner. And so this is how we envisage really agentic nature at CluedIn. So for this, we came up with essentially a framework, set of policies on how this would actually look like in the CluedIn platform itself. And I think it's really been modeled off how we at CluedIn engage with our customers as well. Our professional services team has spent 10 plus years working with different industries, different sizes of business, different complexities of use cases, different global businesses, so cross country, cross language. And essentially this has allowed us to build this loop into the agent, which makes them reliable and prove value in the end. So the first, of course, is observe. So that is, as soon as I see something, my first job is to plan, is to understand, it's to come up with some analysis, and then start to decide on the actual work itself. What tasks need to be done, how we're going to approach them, what tools we have access to be able to help us with that as well. Then there's the act part. Now, we have a rule inside of CluedIn. There's a planning phase, and then there's an acting phase. These are different. And the plan is always surfaced to an owner. This is a human in the loop that can tweak the plan, that can modify it, that can add, that can delete, that can just cancel a plan and try again. And this is all done before the acting happens. At CluedIn, we have this concept of soft actions, which basically means that the job of an agent is to set up a bunch of deterministic tasks that will do the same thing every single time, present that to the human in the loop, and say, this is what I'm going to build. Now, in this, it has a nice little mechanism in that the agents can never go off and really say, okay, great, I'm going to go do that work now, and change its mind at a later point. In fact, we have this saying inside of CluedIn, the job is to turn the heuristic into the deterministic. And that's really where these things can run at scale in the enterprise, and we can all go to bed at night knowing it's going to do the same thing every time. So after we've done the act, we can then start to solidify the act into something deterministic. And then of course, it's about measuring the overall impact of those changes. These come in the form of things like how much did data quality, accuracy, completeness, timeliness, uniformity, relevance, these ISO 25012 standards around data quality, how much did they go up versus down? How many things were approved from an end user versus rejected? And this is this loop that starts, that allow these agents to get better and better and better over time. One of the technologies that CluedIn bet on very early on in its life was the use of graph. In fact, it is the main modeling capability underneath CluedIn. Allows flexibility of modeling. I'll give you an example. It allows the ability that we're not conforming all of our data into the same view, into the same graph, into the same model, into the same schema. This is not something mandated from a good graph database driven system. So what it allows us to do is handle the exceptions. This is often the case where a good MDM system will be able to get you to a solution pretty quickly, 80%, maybe 70%, 80% of the job done. And then where all the time is spent is in that final 20, 30%, which can't have data look the same and in the same model and in the same structure. And that's really where this graph database approach starts to take over. And it's pretty fundamental as well. Now, what this does in the age of AI is it allows you to essentially have this automated ontology sitting over your data, describing how everything fits together. And as you will probably be aware, not everything fits together in the same way. Having this graph, having it flexible, in that in some cases we might have products that are directly related to transactions. In other cases, we might have it jump through other different types of objects. In a graph world, that's completely fine. And so another way of saying this is the true value of graph is really its ability to be agile and flexible to the real nature of data, that it doesn't all fit together. It doesn't click together in the same way. And if not, we wouldn't really be in this problem that MDM and data quality solves. There's a nice knock-on effect of this in the AI era, is that you can imagine for agents to talk to agents, or for end users to be able to talk through MCP to agents or directly to systems via classic REST APIs. It would be nice to know a little bit of context about what am I working with. Not only is it good for getting the right answer, but it's good for optimization of tokens as well. In that that early discovery of what types of queries should I be running, how should I query it, are there any languages I should be using specifically to do this? That's what this graph can bring. It can bring a lot of that kind of system level prompt that says, I can fast track you on how to work with me. This is just at the bedrock, the foundation of CluedIn since day one. How does this actually translate for anyone that's worked in MDM projects before? And so really the traditional approach to MDM has always been this very upfront, controlled approach. It starts with data modeling. This concept of, right, I want all of that on the left to start looking like this new beautiful thing on the right. And it suffers from two main complexities. Number one is your data on the left doesn't look like the data on the right. So you're going to be working quite painful and tediously through IT pipelines, ETL, all of these things to be able to essentially squeeze or attempt to squeeze this data from across different schemas, different models, different systems, different implementations into this kind of one beautiful view of the data. Now, if you've been in data for a long time, you'll realize this doesn't exist. Does not exist. And it was painful in the past to be able to try and achieve this. And actually the funny thing was, in the end, if you were able to achieve this, the kind of values that were sold of getting your data in the same format didn't come to fruition. It wasn't faster to get reports out. It wasn't easier to add new data sets. It wasn't that our data was more standardized. We didn't get more speed. We didn't get more autonomy. Quite the opposite happened. And I believe this is often where traditional MDM approaches got its bad reputation from. Well, let me talk through a new approach which really alleviates a lot of those complexities that were involved with traditional approaches. Let's start with the fact that the reality is, and we've got many years at CluedIn to help prove and back this up, is that a lot of the core data quality and MDM capabilities, whether it's rules, policy, standardization, AI is already aware of the 80% of rules that you'll want to enforce on your data. I think at a base level, we want our data to be in the right formats. Emails, VAT numbers, social security numbers, phone numbers. There are international standards around all of these. We want it to look good. That's the first thing. AI is capable of this, and it was 2-3 years ago with models already. So we can tick that this upfront rule building, upfront validation building, there is an agentic approach to that can fast track this immensely. The other thing is that we don't require our end users then to be these experts on what are the standards. What's RFC? What's the RFC for phone numbers? The AI has this instilled into it, and definitely the CluedIn agents have that as well. For matching, this is a classic one. The reality is that matching rules are great. They handle finding duplicate records for a large percentage, maybe 40, 50% of global matching duplicate records. Great. What are we going to do about the other 50% that don't fit into these nice, structured, deterministic, or even probabilistic rules? And really the agentic nature is to go through this loop, well-tested, battle-tested loop of start with the deterministic things, clean your data, try the rules again, clean again, maybe enrich, try with deterministic again. Maybe use AI in that a little bit to handle the looking through all the possible matches to see if it would also agree with these deterministic rules. And so agentic is really about these loops that we're building around the process that we would ask any user to do themselves, but now we're scaling it with the intelligence of these sophisticated models, and you can imagine you get a lot of speed from that as well. From a stewardship perspective, for me, agentic is about let AI be the first responder. That's what we're calling it at CluedIn. I.e., let it give a look at these things first, summarize, build a plan, aggregate, come up with like an idea of how it's going to do it, and then let it come to you. Tweak it at that point, do your own analysis at that point as well, but the heavy lifting can be done via these agents. Your job, of course, is in these very ad hoc situations to say, hey, listen, there's no way you would have known we have these internal policies or these rules or these processes that store the data in a different way. Let me instill that IP into you. And this is really coming from subject matter experts to allow this to happen. So that's where the context comes in. So no longer about building manual data dictionaries, no longer about, putting in your own manual metadata. A lot of the time this context information exists on other channels, and it's about being able to add that knowledge into the loops of these agents as well. And you can imagine this is also where we get the scale. So there's some very obvious questions to ask. Okay, what's the risk involved with this? My challenge is that I don't know what the agents are doing. I don't have that granularity down to a cell level change of what it's going to do. And this is fair. And that's the reason, because I'm sure majority of us, if we're doing any work with data today, with AI, we're probably doing that through interfaces like ChatGPT and Claude, and these are very powerful and amazing tools, but they're not built for that granularity of attribution and lineage that you would expect from an MDM system. This comes with the agents from CluedIn. So let's just take little things like this. How do I know that in changing a phone number that it didn't change a 1 to a 0 and it's just impossible for me to see it when I'm fixing a million records? Well, this really is the guardrails and the scale that a good agentic data management system brings. Attribution, lineage, full explanation trails, ability to roll forward and roll back if necessary at a later point, cell level attribution, who did what, when, why, what model, at what time, what was the response, what did you send versus what did you get back from the AI model. These are capabilities that if you need to dive into that detail, a good MDM, good agentic data management system provides those guardrails. The other is, how on earth, if the AI finds millions of issues, am I going to scale that manual approval rejection process? So to make this kind of easier, essentially what we're wanting to do, and let me just get my camera back. Good, I'm back. So obviously what we are wanting to do with that is, okay, well, how can we on the back end do some real smarts around grouping decisions together? Instead of giving a million individual things to change, how can we pre-process this data and say, hey, listen, here are a couple of changes, maybe a couple thousand. You can quite happily go through and just approve those, because here is the rule, deterministic rule that's going to make that data change. Very easy to auto-approve. Here's also the changes that, to be honest, you are going to have to meticulously go through, but it's not something I'm going to ask you to do right now. You could do this over time. When you want to take the time to be able to invest in this, go for it. We can also introduce orchestrator patterns, auditor patterns from AI to say, let a completely different AI go over the same type of challenge. And if they both come up with the same response, feel free to approve those. If they don't, they're the things we're going to manually triage. At the end of the day, CluedIn has a human-in-the-loop guarantee. Everything that agents do, whether it's wanting to change, merge duplicate records together, goes through a human loop process. So humans stay in control and are scaled with the use of AI as well. So it's worth mentioning, and I alluded to this before, that MDM and data quality has this real positive element to it, is that it's finite what you expect these systems to do. And because of this, CluedIn ships out of the box with agent templates that are enabled just to turn on, point at your data, and run. They don't need tweaking. They don't need additions. They are general templates that are good at solving general tasks, fixing data quality issues, matching and merging, filling in missing values, applying and creating rules and policies for validation. These can be tweaked. You can add your own agents. This is typically the case with the majority of our customers. They're adding their own specialized agents as well. So at the end of the day, what Agentic Data Management does in reality, it allows you to get to value many times quicker. It allows a team that might not be immensely experienced in data quality and MDM to suddenly have a solution that makes them look like they've been doing this their entire life. They know the standards, they know what validation should be in place, they know how to fix things, they've got good audit trails, they've got good lineage, they've got good attribution all in place. At the end of the day, this is about being able to deliver this data ready for insight. And if that insight is to be used against Claude chat, copilot chat, ChatGPT chat, whether it's agent-to-agent interaction, whether it's just fueling a business intelligence chart or helping with automation of supply chain, having a good trusted foundation of data is where this starts. So how do you get started? The funny thing with AI is that it hasn't changed the idea of how you start to see value, how you start these initiatives. And so starting with a use case, starting with, let me just fix my video. I'll just turn it off. Starting with a problem, starting with a business domain that you know can provide value. Employee, customer, client, vendor, supplier. These are often data domains that if you were to produce a better quality version of it, you can see real top line or bottom line change in the business. Start with some level of baselining. This is also why our agents start out with that kind of inspect and planning mode, is that they first of all want to get a picture of what it looks like now to be able to put together their tasks of what to do. There is automated measuring that happens with CluedIn around data quality, around completeness, accuracy, relevance, etc. And then it's about being able to see what is actually suggested from the platform to increase the overall value. We evaluate the output. This is what the agents can help with as well. And then it's really about being able to move on to other business cases after this. So how does CluedIn help with this? Well, as I've alluded to throughout this session, it starts with being able to build up that trusted view of your entities, the relationships that exist between it, and the lineage to what happened to get in this place in the first place. So having these agents that work across an ontology by nature, it allows a very full picture, a 360 view of the data instead of this very isolated working on tables one at a time. We know there's context that exists in relationships. This is what the CluedIn Agentic MDM environment brings. Obviously, matching and merging or entity reconciliation is the bread and butter of a good MDM system. Often our job is consolidation, and this is about being able to bring together data, but handling those situations of conflicts that happen when you do bring together data. Things like if we have a conflict in a phone number, or a conflict in a DUNS number, or a conflict in an identifier, in what situations would we choose one as the golden value over another? And then it's that loop that I talked about. How do we have that continuous loop that we're not having to prompt our agents to work when we remember it? We're wanting to give them an isolated job, and we have them proactively act when they realize that they have work to do. Now, MDM is only one piece of the overall supply chain of data. And this is why we make sure we integrate with other platforms. We are a Microsoft aligned vendor, which means we work nicely with the Microsoft stack, whether that's Microsoft Fabric and Purview from a data governance perspective. And we provide our lineage, our attribution to those third-party systems as well. So how does this shift kind of and change give an overall kind of view to the end user itself? The kind of end feeling of taking an agentic approach to this is actually quite different to a traditional MDM approach. It's much more about letting the system find the issues and then being the orchestrator of its findings. We don't ask you to build the rules. We don't ask you to build the matching rules. We don't ask you to choose what enrichment services you should be using. The agents are capable of this, but then they surface the actual work to an end user. And these are on channels like Teams or Slack or Office or 365 or ServiceNow or Jira, the places where people are already working. And we federate that out onto these channels. So even the approach of implementing MDM today with Agentic Data Management, that's one of the main differentiators. Thank you for your time, and if you'd like to get started, you can head over to CluedIn.com. You can enter your details, and within 30 seconds, you've got your own CluedIn account for free. First 10, 15,000 records are on us, including $100 US worth of AI credits to try these agents out yourself. Enjoy.